And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Today I'm reviewing a piece of paper. Not really. This is a scenario for the Settlers of Catan. And you're thinking, what? You know, if you know anything about Settlers of Catan, one of the most famous games that's ever come out in the last 20 years, probably the most, well, probably tied with Magic the Gathering for the most famous game that's come out in the last 20 years. Sold millions and millions of copies of Settlers of Catan, and there are thousands, and I'm not exaggerating. I know I exaggerate a lot in these reviews, but I'm not exaggerating. There are thousands of scenarios for Catan. Well, okay, there's at least hundreds. There's probably 1,000. There's books of it. I see them all the time, different cities, different variations on the game. But this is more than a scenario. This is like a mini expansion. I would compare this to, if you ever played the mini expansion Fisherman of Catan, this is very similar to that one. And this adds oil. It's the Oil Springs version. It comes with a sheet of paper and a sheet of counters that are added to the game. Let's take a look, and I'll tell you what I think of this expansion and adding it to Catan. The rules come with a setup for the game, and it shows you how to set up and add the oil. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be changing one of the desert hexes on the board and adding an oil resource to it. With this tile, shows that there's oil and shows a number on it. You'll also be adding oil to one of the planes by putting the token down to show that oil is produced there, and then there's room to put the number on top of it. And you can really do whatever you want, but there is a set scenario, and there's enough pieces that you can even add it to another desert tile for a 5 to 6 player game. And once again, you can do what you want and set up your own scenarios. What you'll do is, if you have a town or a city next to one of these spots, you will get resources, oil resources. Now these aren't cards, notice, although they technically count as a card for purposes of the robber. Someone can steal them from you and take oil from you, knowing exactly what they're getting. And so you have to be careful with the oil in front of you, and everyone can see what you have and take it from you. You can use oil in 2 different ways. You can discard an oil and take 2 resources of your choice of the same kind. That's tempting, but even more tempting, you can trade in 2 oil, a brick, a grain, and rock, and trade that in for a metropolis. Now what a metropolis will do is you put that underneath a city. You're basically upgrading your city into a metropolis. A metropolis is rocking because it's worth 3 points at the end of the game, and it will produce 3 resources for you as the game progresses. A metropolis is also immune to flooding. Flooding? Well, hang on. We'll get to flooding in a moment. If you don't want to do that, you can also take oil and sequester oil, basically saying, I will never use oil. For every 3 oil that you do that for, that's worth a victory point. In fact, the first person to do it gets this token here, which basically is the, I am the champion of the environment. That's what that is. Now, the reason you want to do this is because every time oil is used, you mark it on this board here. We have a marker here that every 5 times that oil is used, something's going to happen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or longer than that in a 5 to 6 player game. And when that happens, when the oil is used, you roll dice. And if you roll a 7 on a dice, then there's coastal flooding. And all the cities on the coast are reduced to settlements, and all the settlements are destroyed, and metropolises are reduced to cities, but metropolises aren't reduced because they're immune to flooding. So yay for metropolises. Also, if you don't roll a 7, then you're going to roll a random number, and that number is going to be removed from the board. And so it's going to destroy tiles, basically, and cause them not to be producing anymore. The game is played to 12 points now, because you're going to get points from getting the defender of the environment. You're going to get points from sequestering oil. You're going to get extra points from building metropolises. And again, this defender of the environment can be taken from player to player, just like whoever has sequestered the most oil can steal it from the next person, just like the longest road and the biggest army. The game is over with 12 points, or the game is over when 5 numbers have been removed from the board due to environment damage. At that point, no one wins. Although this person here can kind of claim a Pyrrhic victory. Yay, I won because I cared about the environment. And that's basically it. Now, real quick, my thoughts on the subject. It's a simple scenario. It's the kind of scenario that I like the most to add to Catan. Just like the Fisherman of Catan, this doesn't add a whole ton to the game. It adds some simple things with oil, and it offers some good decisions. I don't know that I'm ever going to use oil again to trade in for 2 resources, but I definitely, those metropolises are nice. And sequestering oil is pretty decent to get points too. So it's a neat thing in that regard. It is a little preachy. They say, we're not trying to say oil's bad, but they really come across as saying oil's bad. Now, I'm not trying to get political here in this review at all. And so it is what it is. But it certainly comes across as save the environment, don't use oil. That's the kind of message that the expansion certainly preaches pretty loud, at the same time offering you wonderful benefits from these metropolises that you can build. So it is what it is. It's a cool little thing. I would use this often in a game of Catan just to shake things up, just like I use Fisherman of Catan. So it's an expansion that I do enjoy playing.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.
Yeah.